All right, let's jump right in. We're on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus has just made a huge shift in his teaching style. I mean, he goes from these very direct sermons to telling stories, parables. And in this breakdown of Matthew chapter 13, we're going to try to figure out what these stories really mean, and maybe more importantly, why he started teaching this way in the first place.
So just try to picture it. You're standing in this massive crowd. You've heard Jesus teach before, things like the Sermon on the Mount, which was super clear, right? But today, something's different. He gets into a boat, pushes off from the shore a little, and just starts telling these stories about a farmer throwing seeds. It's such a pivot that it immediately begs a pretty big question.
And that question right there is the mystery that kind of hangs over this whole chapter. Why the sudden change from being so straightforward to telling these, well, riddles? It's clearly not an accident. This is a deliberate choice. And you know what? It wasn't just confusing to the crowds. It completely threw his own disciples for a loop.
Yeah, that's right. His own inner circle had to pull him aside later and basically ask, hey, what's going on? Why are you talking like this all of a sudden? They knew him, and they could tell that this new style was intentionally veiling the message. They just didn't get the why behind it.
And this is the core of Jesus' answer. He says he's doing it to reveal the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. Now, a mystery in the biblical sense isn't some unsolvable puzzle. Think of it more like a truth that's hidden in plain sight, invisible to those with closed-off hearts, but crystal clear to those who genuinely want to see, those with ears to hear. The parables almost act like a filter, you know? They separate the merely curious from the truly committed.
So with that in mind, let's get into the first few parables. These are the foundational ones. They're all about how the kingdom of God starts and how it grows in the world, beginning with probably one of the most famous parables ever told.
First up, the sower throws seed on the wayside. This is that hard, packed-down dirt on the edge of the field. The seed, which represents the message of the kingdom, just sits on the surface. It can't get in. So it's heard, sure, but with zero understanding. It's just snatched away before it has any chance at all.
Then you've got the stony places. This is that thin layer of dirt over a bunch of rock. This represents a really shallow emotional response. You know, someone gets super excited at first, but because there's no real depth, no root system, the second things get tough, the moment a little heat or persecution comes along, that initial joy just withers away to nothing.
The third type of soil is thorny ground. Now, here the seed actually does take root. It starts to grow, but it's not alone. It's in a constant battle with all these thorns, which Jesus says are the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. And these distractions, they just grow up faster and stronger, and they literally choke the life out of the plant so it can't produce anything worthwhile.
And finally, we get to the good ground. This is the heart that's ready. It hears the word, it understands it, and it welcomes it in, letting it take deep, strong roots. This is the only type of ground that produces a harvest, and what a harvest it is. It's a brilliant way of showing that the power isn't just in the seed, but in the condition of the heart that receives it.
Okay, so just when you think you've got the concept down, Jesus adds this other layer of complexity with the parable of the wheat and the tares. And this reveals a really core mystery. In this current age, the kingdom isn't going to be some perfectly pure, spotless thing. Nope. Good and evil, the wheat and the weeds, are going to grow right alongside each other. And the big separation, that doesn't happen until the very end, at the final harvest.
So, if that's how the kingdom grows, this messy mix of good and bad, what is it actually worth? Well, the next two parables zoom in on that very question. They shift from the process of growth to the incredible value of the kingdom and what it really asks of us.
I love these two parables. They're like two sides of the very same coin. First, you have the hidden treasure. A guy literally just stumbles upon it by accident while he's working. That's kind of like someone who finds the gospel through just unexpected grace. But then you have the pearl of great price. This is found by a merchant who's been looking his whole life, searching diligently for the best pearl. It's the end of a long, long quest for truth.
But here's the kicker. This is the part that ties them both together, and it's absolutely crucial. It doesn't matter if they found it by accident or after a long search. Their reaction was identical. They both immediately sold everything they had to get that one thing. The message couldn't be clear. The kingdom of heaven is worth so much that it demands nothing less than your entire life. It's an all-in commitment.
And that brings us to what feels like the climactic parable of the whole chapter. The parable of the net kind of pulls all these other themes together. The wide reach of the kingdom, that mix of good and bad inside it, and the absolute certainty of a final judgment. The imagery here is just so powerful. You have this massive fishing net, a dragnet, thrown into the sea, which represents the world, and it just scoops up fish of every kind. The message seems to be that the gospel goes out to everyone, everywhere. It doesn't discriminate. It just gathers up everyone who gets caught in its reach.
And this breaks down the process step by step. First, the net goes out. Then, it fills up with all sorts of things. Then, it's dragged to the shore, which symbolizes the end of the age. And it's only then, on the shore, that the sorting finally begins. The angels show up, and they start the work of separating the good from the bad.
And the result of that sorting is incredibly stark. There's no middle ground here. Just like in the parable of the tares, the bad are gathered and cast into a furnace of fire. It's a really sobering, direct conclusion that just hammers home the ultimate seriousness of it all.
So after this whole series of intense stories, Jesus turns back to his disciples and asks them a simple question. Have you understood all these things? And when they say yes, he gives them a whole new job description.
He tells them that every teacher who has been instructed about the kingdom is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom treasures both new and old. What he's saying is that the disciples are now equipped to teach people by drawing on the old, the timeless truths from the scriptures and prophets, and the new, the incredible mysteries of the kingdom that he had just revealed to them.
And then, just in case we thought this was all purely theoretical, the chapter ends with this tragic, real-life example of how these parables play out. Jesus packs up, leaves the seaside, and goes back to his hometown, Nazareth.
He starts teaching in their local synagogue. And the people there are, well, they're astonished. They can't deny his wisdom. They can't deny the incredible things he's doing. But they just can't square it with the guy they grew up with.
And look at their reasons for doubt. You can almost hear them whispering to each other, "Wait, isn't this the carpenter's son? We know his mom, Mary. His brothers and sisters live right here." Their sheer familiarity with his human life became the very thing that blocked them from seeing his divine nature. And because of it, the text says they took offense at him.
And Jesus' reply is this famous, heartbreaking observation. In his own town, among his own people, he was the seed that fell on the wayside, that hard, compacted ground from the very first parable. They heard him, but their hearts were too hardened by what they thought they knew to actually receive the truth. And it says because of their unbelief, he didn't do many miracles there.
And really, that story of Nazareth is the perfect, powerful closing statement for this whole chapter. It's a warning. It shows us that sometimes the biggest truths aren't hidden behind complicated riddles. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, wrapped in a familiarity that makes them so easy to dismiss. Which leaves us with this final question to think about.